The morning I drove up to the little craftsman house on Sycamore Lane, I was only planning to drop off a casserole and some fresh-cut flowers from my garden. I was not planning to stay. I was not planning to fight anyone. I was not planning to change the entire course of my daughter's life before lunchtime. But when I knocked on the front door and nobody answered, and when I let myself in with the spare key she had given me 2 Christmases ago, and when I walked into that kitchen and found my daughter standing over the sink with her back to me, scrubbing a cast iron pan so hard her whole arm was shaking and crying, I knew immediately that something was very, very wrong. She didn't even hear me come in. That was the first thing that broke my heart. She was so deep inside her own exhaustion, so used to just putting her head down and pushing through, that the sound of the door, my footsteps on the hardwood floor, none of it reached her. I stood there for a moment in the kitchen doorway, holding my casserole dish with both hands, taking in everything around me. The sink was piled with dishes, not a few dishes, every dish in the house, it seemed. Pots, pans, plates stacked in precarious towers, coffee mugs lined up along the counter. The kitchen table was covered in crumbs and sticky rings from glasses set down without coasters. There were shoes scattered near the back door, a child's backpack thrown across one of the kitchen chairs, and a half-eaten bag of chips left open on the counter next to my daughter's good mixing bowls. My daughter's name is Claire. She is 41 years old. She has her father's dark eyes and my stubborn jaw and a laugh. When she actually laughs, that fills up an entire room. She is one of the most capable women I have ever known in my life, and seeing her standing there, trembling over that sink, crying silently the way women cry when they've run out of the energy, even for real tears, made something in my chest clench so hard I had to breathe through it. "Claire," I said softly. She startled so badly she nearly dropped the pan. She spun around, and the look on her face when she saw me, that flash of pure, desperate relief followed immediately by something like shame, told me more than any words could have. "Mom," her voice came out cracked, "I didn't know you were coming today." "I brought a casserole," I said, which was a ridiculous thing to say. But I needed a second to steady myself. I set it down on the one clear patch of counter I could find. "Sweetheart, tell me what's going on." Before she could answer, I heard them. From the living room, the sound of a television turned up too loud. The thump of someone walking heavily across the floor upstairs, in my daughter's house, in the bedroom hallway. A child's voice shrieking something, and then another child's voice shrieking back louder, and then a woman's voice, sharp and carrying, calling out without even lowering the volume of the TV, "Claire, we're out of the good coffee again. Not the cheap stuff, the good stuff. Can you run out and get more?" I looked at my daughter. My daughter looked at me. She wiped her face quickly with the back of her wrist. "That's my sister-in-law," she said in a low voice. "Denise. How long has she been here?" Claire looked at the floor. 3 weeks. I set my purse down on the kitchen chair very deliberately and sat down at the table. "Sit," I told her. "Sit down right now and tell me everything." She sat, and then, the way she always has since she was a little girl, she told me, here is what I had not known. Here is what my daughter had been carrying alone for 3 weeks while I was 40 minutes away, thinking everything was fine. 18 months ago, Claire had gone through a divorce. 8 years of marriage to a man named Derek, who was not cruel, not dramatic, not a villain in any obvious way. He simply didn't love her anymore, and had the decency to say so instead of making her miserable for another decade. They separated without screaming matches, sold the house they had bought together in Marietta, split everything fairly. Claire walked away with enough money to start over and a heart that was bruised but not broken. She came to stay with me for 6 weeks. We watched old movies and I taught her how to make my mother's biscuit recipe. And we talked, really talked, more than we had since she was in college. By the time she left, she had a plan. She was going back to school part-time for her paralegal certification, something she had put on hold for years. She had found a small craftsman house for rent in a neighborhood she loved, close to the firm where she'd been working as a legal secretary for 7 years. She was going to be okay. I believed that with my whole heart. And then she met Marcus. Marcus came into her life 9 months after the divorce was finalized. He was introduced through mutual friends, and from everything Claire told me, he seemed genuinely kind, steady. A man who called when he said he would call and showed up when he said he would show up, which after everything she'd been through felt like an extraordinary thing. They dated for 8 months. They moved in together. They were talking about getting engaged. I had met him 4 times. He seemed like a decent man, quiet, a little reserved, but thoughtful. He worked in logistics management and traveled occasionally for work. He seemed to genuinely care about my daughter. What I had never quite accounted for was his family. Marcus was the oldest of 4 siblings, and somewhere along the way, in the particular way these dynamics develop in some families, he had become the one everyone leaned on, the one who fixed things, the one who said yes. His mother lived out in Savannah and mostly kept to herself, thank God. But his sister Denise was a different story entirely. Denise was 36, between jobs and between apartments, which was apparently a recurring state of affairs in her life. 3 weeks before I arrived with my casserole, her lease had ended, and rather than stay in a hotel or with friends while she sorted out her next situation, she had simply shown up at Claire's house with 4 suitcases, her boyfriend Kyle, and Kyle's 10-year-old son from a previous relationship. Marcus had said yes without asking Claire first. He told me after she was already on her way, Claire said, sitting across from me at her own kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she'd made for herself before I arrived and clearly hadn't touched. It had gone cold. He said it would only be a week or 2, that she just needed a little time to find a new place, that she was family and we had the extra room. And the extra room, I said carefully. That's the room you use as your home office, for your coursework. She nodded. So, where are you doing your coursework? She was quiet for a moment. I've been trying to do it at the kitchen table, late at night after everyone's asleep. I looked at the kitchen table. I looked at the crumbs, the sticky rings, the general chaos of it. I thought about my daughter, 41 years old, sitting here at midnight, trying to study for her paralegal courses after spending the entire day cooking and cleaning for 4 additional people. Tell me about the cooking, I said, because I was beginning to understand the dimensions of this. She told me. Denise didn't cook. Kyle didn't cook. The boy, whose name was Brody, was a 10-year-old child and therefore could not reasonably be expected to cook, which I understood completely. But Denise and Kyle were adults, and somehow from the very first day, the cooking had simply fallen to Claire. Not because anyone asked directly. It happened the way these things always happen. The first night, Claire made dinner for everyone because it seemed like the hospitable thing to do, The second night, Denise sat on the couch until Claire started cooking again. By the third night, it was simply assumed. Denise had opinions about what she wanted to eat and was not shy about sharing them. Kyle ate whatever was put in front of him, but always wanted more. Brody had a long list of foods he refused, which Claire was now navigating daily. "And groceries?" I asked. "I've been doing the shopping," she said. "Has anyone given you money toward groceries?" She didn't answer, which was its own answer. "Claire, Marcus said he would cover it," she said quickly. "But things have been tight since he got passed over for that promotion, and I don't want to push." "Stop," I said. "Stop right there." I took a slow breath. I was 63 years old. I had raised 2 children alone after my husband passed when Claire was 9 and her brother was 12. I had worked as a hospital administrator for 30 years. I had navigated budget meetings and board disputes and every variety of institutional politics you can imagine. I was not a person who lost her composure easily or often. But I was sitting in my daughter's kitchen, looking at her cracked, overworked hands and her hollow eyes, and I was thinking about the home office she had lost, the sleep she had lost, the 3 weeks of her life she had spent serving 4 people who had walked into her home and simply taken it over. "Where is Marcus right now?" I asked. "He flew to Dallas yesterday for a work trip. He'll be back Sunday." It was Friday. And Denise, in the living room, she dropped her voice a little. "She's been out there since 9 this morning. She's looking for jobs online, she says." "And Kyle?" "He went out with some friends last night and he hasn't come back yet." I nodded slowly. I got up from the table, walked to the living room doorway, and looked in. Denise was exactly what I had expected, and nothing I had hoped for. She was sprawled across my daughter's couch, my daughter's good couch, the sage green one Claire had saved up for and been so proud of, with her feet up on the cushions, shoes still on, a blanket that I recognized as Claire's favorite throw pillow tucked behind her head. The television was blaring a reality show. There were 3 empty soda cans on the coffee table and a plate with toast crumbs on it, balanced on the armrest. She glanced over at me when I appeared in the doorway. "Oh," she said without sitting up. "You're Claire's mom, right? I've seen pictures." "I am," I said. "Nice to meet you. Hey, did you hear me ask about the coffee? The Sumatra blend, not the grocery store stuff. I can't function without good coffee in the morning." "I heard you," I said. I turned around and went back to the kitchen. I sat down across from Claire and I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "How are you sleeping?" I asked. She laughed. Not a real laugh. "I'm not really. Brody gets up early and he's not quiet about it. And Kyle came in at 2 a.m, twice this week, and the door—" She stopped. "It's fine. I'm managing." "When did you last work on your coursework? Really work on it, not just try to squeeze it in at midnight." She thought about it. "Maybe 10 days ago? There's a module due next Friday, and I haven't started it." "And have you told Marcus how you're feeling?" The silence that followed that question was the longest one yet. I watched my daughter's face carefully. I watched her choose her words. "I've tried," she said finally. "He says I'm being too sensitive, that Denise is going through a hard time and family supports each other through hard times, that it's only temporary." She paused. "He got a little frustrated the second time I brought it up. He said I knew his family was important to him before we moved in together, and that he thought I understood that. There it was, the same mechanisms, just slightly different machinery. Make the woman feel that her discomfort is a character flaw. Make her feel that asking for basic dignity is a form of selfishness. I had seen this before. I had lived something adjacent to it decades ago, with a mother-in-law who had very strong opinions about how a wife should operate, and I had spent 2 years being too polite and too accommodating before I finally found my backbone. I was not going to watch my daughter spend 2 years finding hers while someone else wore her down to nothing. "Claire," I said, "whose name is on the lease for this house?" She blinked. "Mine." "Just yours?" "Yes. Marcus and I talked about adding his name when we got engaged, but that hasn't happened yet." "So, this is your home. Legally, entirely yours." "Technically, yes, but not technically, actually." I folded my hands on the table. "This is your home. You pay the rent. You buy the groceries. You cook the meals and wash the dishes and lose sleep every night and sacrifice your coursework, your peace, your space, and no one, not one person in that living room has contributed a single dollar to this household in 3 weeks." She looked down at her mug. "I'm going to go talk to Denise," I said, standing up. Claire grabbed my wrist. "Mom, please don't make it worse. If Marcus finds out I complained to you, he's going to say I went behind his back." "You didn't complain to me," I said gently. "I walked in and found you crying. I asked questions. That's different." I covered her hand with mine. "And I need you to hear me right now. You are not causing problems by wanting to sleep in your own home. You're not being selfish by needing your office back. You're not being difficult by expecting the people eating your food and sleeping under your roof to show you a basic minimum of respect. Are you hearing me?" She swallowed hard. "Yes." "Good. Now, let me go have a conversation." I walked into the living room. I did not sit down. I stood in front of the television the way I used to stand in front of a conference room full of people who didn't expect a woman my age to have anything decisive to say. Denise looked up, mildly annoyed at having her view blocked. "We need to talk," I said, "about the arrangement here." She reached for the remote and turned the volume down, but only slightly. "What arrangement?" "The one where you and Kyle have been living in my daughter's home for 3 weeks without contributing to rent, groceries, utilities, or any of the household work." She sat up a little at that. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to something more guarded. "Marcus invited us. We're not just here on our own." "Marcus invited you," I agreed. "But Marcus's name is not on this lease. This is Claire's home, and I think you know that." "Claire never said anything to me about a problem," Denise said, with the particular confidence of someone who has never bothered to look. "Claire is too kind to say it directly," I replied. "So I'm saying it for her. How much have you contributed to groceries since you arrived?" A pause. "Things are tight for us right now. That's why we're here." "Things are tight for my daughter, too. She's a legal secretary working toward a certification that's going to take her career to the next level. She was doing that coursework in the room you're now sleeping in. She has been doing it at the kitchen table at midnight because she doesn't want to wake anyone. She has cooked every meal in this house for the last 3 weeks. She has done every dish in that sink, and she has done all of that without a word of thanks, without a dollar of contribution, and apparently without anyone noticing or caring that she has been running herself into the ground." Brody came thundering down the stairs at that moment, skidding into the kitchen doorway in his socks. He looked between me and Denise with the radar that children have for adult tension. "Brody," Denise said, "go back upstairs." He disappeared, I continued. "I understand that life gets hard sometimes.
I understand that you needed somewhere to land. What I don't understand is how you could live in someone's home for 3 weeks and never once look around and notice what it was costing that person." "With all due respect," Denise said, and I braced myself, because nothing that follows that phrase ever involves actual respect. "I don't think you understand Marcus's family. We look out for each other. That's how we were raised. Claire knew what she was getting into."
Claire knew she was entering a relationship with a man who cares about his family, I said. She did not agree to operate as a live-in housekeeper for that family indefinitely. There is a difference. Denise's jaw tightened. This seems like something that should be a conversation between Claire and Marcus, not Claire and her mother. "You're right," I said. "And when Marcus gets home on Sunday, that conversation will happen. But in the meantime, there is the matter of this house, and what happens in it between now and then." I took out my phone. I had a call to make, and I wanted to make it in that room, clearly and without apology. I called my neighbor, Margaret, who happened to be a retired property attorney and one of my closest friends for 22 years. Margaret picked up on the second ring, because Margaret always picks up. I told her, calmly and specifically, that my daughter was the sole leaseholder on her residence, that guests had been staying for 3 weeks, and that I wanted to confirm my daughter's right to ask those guests to leave if she chose to do so. I asked her to walk me through it. Margaret walked me through it, clearly, specifically. She used the words tenant rights, guest versus occupant status, and legal authority of the leaseholder in ways that carried exactly the weight I needed them to carry. I thanked her, hung up, and looked at Denise. Denise's face had shifted entirely. The comfortable assumption she'd been resting on, that she had just as much right to be here as anyone, had visibly cracked. "Claire," I called toward the kitchen. My daughter appeared in the doorway. She had been listening. I could tell from her face. "This is your home," I said to her, clearly, so that everyone in the room could hear it. "You have every right to decide who stays here and for how long. You have every right to set terms, and anyone who is here because you are generous and kind should recognize that generosity and act accordingly, not take advantage of it." Claire straightened her spine, just barely, just an inch, but I saw it. "Denise," my daughter said, and her voice was quiet but steady, in a way it hadn't been when I first walked in. "I should have said this sooner. I need my office back. I need to be able to sleep. And I need whoever is staying here to help with groceries and meals. Those aren't big asks, but they're not negotiable anymore." The silence that followed was different from the silences before. It had weight in a different direction. "I cannot believe this," Denise said, standing up from the couch. "I cannot believe that you're doing this because of what your mother said. We are Marcus's family. When Marcus hears about this..." "Marcus will hear about it from me," Claire said. "Tonight. And I'm going to tell him exactly what I told you." Denise looked at me. There was genuine fury in her expression, but underneath it, I had seen this before in conference rooms, in difficult conversations, in moments when people realize the leverage they assumed they had has quietly evaporated. There was something more honest. She had walked into this house expecting no resistance. She had built her comfort on my daughter's inability to say no. And now, the ground had shifted. "Fine," she said, picking up her phone from the coffee table and typing rapidly. "I'm calling Marcus right now." "Go ahead," I said pleasantly. She called. It rang several times and went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail again. She texted with the particular aggressive speed of someone who needs a witness for their grievance. She put the phone down and crossed her arms. He'll call back. I'm sure he will, I said. In the meantime, Claire and I are going to have lunch. You're welcome to join us if you'd like to have a civil conversation.
Pauvre, she did not join us. Claire and I sat in the kitchen, and I heated up the casserole I had brought, and we ate together at the cleared end of the table, talking quietly. She was still shaking slightly, the way you do after adrenaline, after finally doing something you've been dreading for weeks. What if he sides with her? She asked me between bites. What if he comes home Sunday and decides I'm the problem? Then you will have very important information about who he is, I said. Oh, and that information is better to have now than 2 years from now. But I love him, Mom. I know you do. And maybe he loves you. But love has to come with respect, Claire, for you specifically, in your specific life. Not just in general terms, not just in theory, in the actual daily reality of your actual life. A man who loves you would not have let you sleep-deprive yourself for 3 weeks without noticing. She was quiet for a moment. He did notice that I seemed tired.
He said I should try to go to bed earlier. I did not say what I was thinking. I ate another bite of casserole instead. Marcus called back 45 minutes later. Claire answered on speaker because I asked her to, and she let me sit beside her at the table. Not to speak, to be present. She knew the difference. He had already spoken to Denise. That was clear from his tone, which was strained in the particular way of someone trying to appear calm while managing a predetermined conclusion. Claire, I think we need to talk about what happened today. I agree, Claire said. I've been trying to talk to you about it for 3 weeks. A pause. You said you were a little stressed. You didn't tell me it was this serious. I told you 3 times, Marcus. The first time, you said Denise just needed a little more time. The second time, you said I was letting it get to me. The third time, you said you couldn't deal with it that week because of the promotion situation. Another pause, longer this time. Denise says your mom came in and basically told them they had to leave. My mom came in and found me crying over the sink, Claire said steadily. She asked me what was going on, I told her, and then she helped me say what I should have been saying for 3 weeks. She called a lawyer, Claire. She called her neighbor, who's an attorney, yes, to confirm what my rights are in my own home. Which, Marcus, I need you to hear. This is my home. My name is on the lease. I pay the rent. I have been buying the groceries and cooking every meal and losing sleep over my own coursework for 3 weeks, and nobody has offered me a single dollar or a single thank you. The silence on the other end was different now. I watched my daughter's face, watched her hold her ground. I didn't know it had gotten that bad, Marcus said finally. His voice had lost the strained quality. Something underneath it sounded genuinely ashamed. I tried to tell you, she said, not as an accusation, just as a fact. I know you did, and I told you you were overreacting, and I was wrong. He exhaled. I'll call Denise. I'll tell her she needs to have a real plan to be out by the end of next week. Not just a vague sometime soon. And Kyle, he's been useless, hasn't he? It wasn't quite a question. He came home at 2 a.m. twice this week, Claire said. I couldn't sleep. I have a module due next Friday that I haven't started. I'll handle it. Claire, I'm sorry. I should have set terms from the beginning. I should have made sure you were okay instead of assuming you would just manage. I reached over and put my hand briefly on Claire's arm. She glanced at me and I gave her a small nod. Thank you, she said to Marcus. That matters, but I also need you to understand that this can't happen again. I can't have family, your family or anyone else, move in without us making the decision together, as partners, before it happens, not after. You're right, Bee, he said. Completely right. Can we talk more Sunday when I'm home? Yes, she said. I'd like that. They hung up. Claire sat with her hands in her lap for a moment. How do you feel? I asked. She thought about it. Terrified, she said. But also, lighter. I feel lighter. Good, I said. Hold on to that.
Denise was cool toward us for the rest of the afternoon, which was fine. Kyle returned around dinner time, took one look at the atmosphere in the house, and was unusually quiet and cooperative, cleaning up after himself at the table in a way he apparently hadn't bothered to do in 3 weeks. Brody, who was just a child and bore no responsibility for any of this, ate his dinner and asked Claire if she liked Minecraft, which she didn't. But she talked to him about it anyway with genuine patience, because that is who my daughter is. I stayed until after dinner. I helped with the dishes. At one point, Denise came into the kitchen to get a glass of water and stood at the counter for a moment and then said, without turning around, I know I haven't been pulling my weight. I'll do better. It wasn't an apology, exactly, but it was something. That would mean a lot to Claire, I said and left it there. I drove home that night with my hands steady on the wheel, watching the Georgia highway unspool in my headlights. I felt the way you feel after something difficult that was also absolutely necessary. Wrung out, quiet inside, deeply tired, and somehow also more awake than I'd been in months. I thought about my daughter in that kitchen, crying over a sink, not even making a sound. I thought about how long she had been doing that, not just for 3 weeks, but in some form or another, in some version of that same posture, for years, accommodating, managing, making herself smaller so that other people could be comfortable. It was something she had learned, I thought, in the years after her father died. When she was 9 years old, and the world had turned uncertain, and the safest thing seemed to be to not need too much, to not ask for too much, to hold everything quietly inside. I had taught her resilience. I was proud of that. But somewhere along the way, resilience had calcified into self-erasure, and that I was less proud of because some of it, not all, but some, was my fault. The lesson I should have been teaching alongside Be Strong was know what you deserve. And I hadn't taught that one loudly enough. She called me that night around 9. Her voice sounded like herself, the real herself, the one that surfaces when the weight lifts.
Denise actually came and apologized, she told me, like a real apology. She said she got comfortable and stopped paying attention and that she was sorry for what it cost me. She said she'd have a check for me by Monday for her share of groceries. How did that feel? Honestly, surprising. A small pause. Good. It felt good. And how are you feeling about Sunday? About Marcus? She considered it. Nervous, but also, I said things to him today that I've needed to say for a long time. Not just about Denise, about how I need us to work. If we're going to work, I told him I can't do another relationship where I disappear. Her voice wavered just slightly. And he didn't get defensive. He actually listened. That's something, I said. It doesn't fix everything overnight. But It's a real something. I know. A breath. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. How did you know it was worth it? Coming in like that, saying what you said, how did you know it wasn't going to blow everything up? I thought about that for a long moment, looking out my apartment window at the streetlights coming on one by one down the block. I didn't know, I said honestly. I knew that watching you disappear was not acceptable to me. I knew that the version of you I walked in and found this morning was not who you actually are. And I knew that nothing good is ever built on top of one person's quiet, invisible suffering. So whatever was going to happen, I needed to say it. The rest wasn't mine to control. She was quiet. You are worth the risk, Claire. You have always been worth the risk. I need you to know that without me having to come in and say it. I'm working on it, she said, soft and honest. I know, I can already see it. We said goodnight. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the armchair by the window for a long time before I went to bed, listening to the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood settling into the evening. Marcus came home Sunday. They talked for most of the day, and Claire called me that night with the kind of tired but clear voice that comes after a conversation that matters. He had listened. He had been honest about the ways he had defaulted to his family at her expense, about the pattern that had been building without him seeing it clearly. He had cried, she said, which she hadn't expected, and which had somehow mattered more than the apology itself because it meant he understood the weight of it, not just the logistics.
Denise and Kyle found a sublet 2 weeks later and moved out on a Saturday. Claire sent me a photo that afternoon of her home office, freshly reorganized, her textbooks stacked neatly on the desk, a small plant in the window that she had treated herself to at the farmer's market that morning. Underneath the photo, she had written 4 words. It's mine again. I must have stared at those 4 words for 5 full minutes. I thought about what it costs a woman to lose herself by degrees. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, accommodation by accommodation, silence by silence, until she looks up one day and can't quite remember who she was before she started shrinking. And I thought about what it means to get it back. Not to have someone give it back to you, but to reach out and take it, to say out loud in your own voice, "This is mine, and I will not apologize for that." She submitted her module on time. She passed. She called me when she got the grade back, and we celebrated over the phone like she had won something enormous, which I suppose she had. 3 months later, I went back to Sycamore Lane for dinner. Claire cooked, because she wanted to, because she loves to cook when cooking is a choice and not a sentence. Marcus set the table and did the dishes without being asked. They were different with each other. Not perfect, not without the work that was still ahead of them, but present in a way that felt earned and real. After dinner, sitting on the back porch with a glass of wine while Marcus cleared up inside, Claire turned to me and said, "Thank you for that Friday." "You did the hard part," I told her. "I just showed up." She shook her head slowly. "You showed up. You stayed. You didn't tell me what I wanted to hear." She looked at me with those dark eyes that have been breaking and remaking my heart since the first time I looked into them 41 years ago. Do you know how many people in my life would have told me to keep the peace, to wait it out, to not make trouble? Probably most of them, I said honestly. "All of them," she said. "You were the only one who didn't." I reached over and took her hand, the way I have been taking her hand since she was small enough to fit into my arms. "I will always show up," I told her. "In whatever kitchen, wherever you're standing, Whatever you've been carrying, I will always show up." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that for a while, on her porch, in her home, in the quiet that belongs to people who have come through something and landed on the other side of it, still standing. That is what this house has always been for. Not just walls and a lease and a square of Georgia lawn.
A place where my daughter gets to be fully herself. A place that is hers and hers alone, and that no one, not a sister-in-law looking for a soft landing, not a pattern of learned smallness, not anyone at all, gets to take from her without a fight. And if they try, I know where the spare key is, and I'm only 40 minutes away